Welcome back to the podcast. And what is the title of this episode? Man, I already know. Your past does not define your future. So let me just go off a few thoughts that I've heard from so many women. I just regular thoughts, just things that people say innocently, and tell me if it sounds familiar. If you've ever said any of these, I've never done it before. It's just the way I am. That's just not me. I've always been this way. I'm not the confident type. I'm just not disciplined. I'm too old to start. This is how I was raised. You know, I wrote an email back in March in Money Academy, our membership. We had a special call where I wrote an email talking to our members and pointing out all these thoughts. And one of our clients, when she got on a one-on-one session with me, she laughed so hard because 90% of these thoughts, this is something she repeated to herself often. So I know this is familiar to most of you. And I think out of these, I have said I've never done it before. That's just not me. Ooh, that's a really good one. Yes, those two. Well, this is how I was raised. Absolutely, I've said that too. So if this is something you've said before, you're in the right place. Welcome to the club. We've all said these things. We've all stated these things as if they're just the truth. Okay? Now, if you have ever experienced saying these things and thinking about your life and thinking that your bank account, your current financial situation, your habits, your history, and you've decided that these are things that are just fixed in place or they're just simply who you are, then today's episode is going to challenge all of that. So stay with me because it's so natural for us humans to use our past against ourselves and to use our past as proof, blueprints of what we're capable in the future. It's almost as if you think about it, you read the first 3, 4, 5 chapters of a book and you think you know how the book is going to end based on the first 5 chapters you read. But isn't it so amazing when you read a book and you realize at the end, like, man, I did not see this coming at all. And I'm so glad I stayed with the book. How many times has that happened to you? And that's the conversation we're going to have to do. We're going to explore the fact that your life has a book, which, by the way, for me, I think our lives is a series of books. But most people think our life is a book and every season of our life is a chapter. So let's just go with that. We'll keep my analogy on the back burner because I will show to you why that analogy is even better than just having chapters. Because if you think about your life as a book and then you have multiple chapters, there's a reason why there are multiple chapters. And the fact that we use the first few chapters to determine how the book is going to end, we're robbing ourselves of the excitement and of the surprises that come along the way, which is why the older I get, the more I realize this is not even a book. My life is not a book. My life is a series of books. Because if you look at the first 5 years of my life and you look at my life now, they don't even have the same title. Like literally my first 5 years and now do not have the same title. There are some similarities because, DNA, but I'm a completely different person. Completely different. Now, if you go to my 20s, in my 20s, I think I probably have 2 books. I have early 20s and late 20s. And then you look at today, the book that I'm writing, and the book that I'm writing now is completely different every single year because I'm not even going to compare 2025 to 2026. It's not even a book because a book at least tells you the story kind of links itself and you can go to chapter 1, read about it and kind of mixes with chapter 10. But there's no similarities at all. So for me, my life is actually a series of books with different titles, which is super fun because it allows me to close a book, have multiple chapters. I can have a book that has 5 chapters or 2 chapters, and I close that book at peace and like with closure. I have closure with that book and I put it away and I start a brand new book, which gives me a lot of freedom to reinvent myself and to believe in the possibility of me being a completely different version. and not relying on my past to determine what happens tomorrow. Every single day, I'm a new version. And that's what I want to introduce you to, because here's how this affects our finances. The reason I had this call in our community, in our membership, is that it's very easy to say, I want to take care of my finances. I want to pay off debt. I want to build wealth. I want to invest. I want to take care of money. I want to build a better relationship with money. It's very easy to say that. But if you're using your past as the blueprint for what you're capable in the future, and these things are things you want to achieve and you've never achieved them before, then they're practically impossible for you to achieve them. Therefore, if you're going to do something different, we have to start with a blank canvas. We can't start with history. The history of your past has nothing to do with what you're doing tomorrow. If you think about, I've never been able to swim before, right? Years and years, I didn't learn how to swim as a kid. As I grew up as an adult, never swam. And if I used that as the blueprint for what was possible for me, I still would not be able to swim today. But I didn't. I closed the chapter of me not swimming and opened a chapter where I tried new things and I learned how to swim. And now I know how to swim. It's a brand new chapter. We do this in our lives, but also the belief that our past determines our future is so entrenched in us that even when we don't use the past as evidence of what we're capable of, it doesn't count. We don't make it count. We completely disregard it, and we still attach ourselves to the belief that our past determines our future. And I want to completely reverse that, break away from that belief system, because it directly impacts how you see your money today. If money feels hard, and if you've been struggling with money, it's impossible for you to not struggle if you use your past against yourself. Because we always find evidence for what we believe, which is why if you are on your journey to have a better relationship with money, the first thing you need to address is not the money. It's what you believe about the money. So if you have a history of having struggled with money in the past, we need to clean that up first. Establish a better, stronger relationship with how you think about money. And then you will be driven to take actions that prove your new belief system. This is why this work is so hard, because a lot of people don't want to do the work, the inner work that is required to change your belief system. We just want to shoot straight to actions. And that sounds very nice, but it's not sustainable if the root of your belief system or the root of who you are on the inside isn't grounded in a new way of seeing money. There is such a thing as poor mentality, and it's not a stigma. There is such a thing as the way you think is really driving your poor relationship with money. And I really want you to think about, if you think money is hard, why would you see opportunities where money isn't? You wouldn't. You will only have your lenses turned on to money is hard. And I want to spend time here because I want you to understand that this is the first part that you need to drill down into your subconscious. That in order for you to be a person who is financially confident and has a strong, controlled relationship with money, you must change the way you think about money. You cannot take all of the beliefs that you were given as a child and the ones you gathered into your adult life up until now, and you just want to effort your way into building financial confidence. It will not work. It hasn't worked yet. Have you ever noticed that all the money books that you read address your mental state and your mindset when it comes to money? And if a money book does not address that, trash that book immediately. It will not help you. The goal is never to pay off the debt. The goal is never to make more money. The goal is never to achieve some financial goal, because you have to stay there if you're going to achieve the goal. It's just like diet culture. You can diet your way out of losing 30 pounds. That's great. But can you stay the woman who is 30 pounds less? Most people cannot. Because diet culture does not teach you how to change the way you think about yourself at a smaller weight. And if you can't change the way you think about yourself, you will always see yourself as a woman who's 30 pounds overweight. And so even when you lose the 30 pounds, you're still going to feel like you're overweight because your mind has a certain idea of who you are. And that doesn't change just because the scale tells you that you've changed. You have to do the work to change that. It's the same thing with money. So that's the number one piece of this conversation. The past has nothing to do with the future. Because if the past has something to do with the future, then you're only repeating your life over and over and over. Most people live that way, and it sucks. It does suck because you're living the same life. Groundhog Day. Who wants that? It's a good movie to watch for an hour and a half, but nobody wants that to be their real life. Okay. So when I talked about this in my in Money Academy, our community, it was very evident that it was the first piece that needed to be addressed. Your past has nothing to do with your future. And going back, trying to rehash it, relive it, try to change it, not useful at all. But it definitely does not determine what is happening tomorrow. Here's what determines what happens tomorrow. You do with your imagination. That's it. Imagination is a gift that is extremely underrated. But we are not given that gift just because. Animals don't have the gift of imagination. We give animals their imagination. They've never told us what they think about and what they imagine. We do not have access to their thoughts. So we know they don't have imagination. But we do because we can express it. And we take it for granted. That's where your future comes from. Your future doesn't come from your past. So again, let me go back to the example of me swimming. Do you know how I learned how to swim? I took a class, right? Yes, so good. But if I went in that class thinking I've never swum before, I tried actually in the past and I wasn't successful. I sink like a piece of brick, right? If that's what I took into that class, how successful do you think I would have been at swimming? I wouldn't have been. I had to tap into my imagination and picture a version of me who can swim, first and foremost, before I actually knew how to swim. And because I imagined myself swimming, I then spent time visualizing a future that had not existed yet, a future where I was in the pool and I was swimming and I was following the instructor's directions and I was actually swimming. I saw myself swimming before I swam. And so our imagination is what actually determines our future. Our gift to be able to go in our brain and visualize a life that we have not yet created physical evidence for. Everything that is created in the world today comes from an idea that was born in someone's brain. So really, the physical manifestation of what we have in our world today has two beginnings. The mental beginning, an idea, and then the physical beginning once the idea is put into material matter. And that is exactly how you create your future. Because if you think about you being bad with money, if that's a belief you have, if you're thinking you're struggling with money and that money is hard, can we just put that into a book and close that book, conclude that book with, and she lived happily ever after? And then we can start the new book with, here's the happily ever after once she learned a new way of navigating her finances. What's the new way? She spent time thinking about the version of herself that enjoyed the new way, the new beliefs. Money's easy. I'm resourceful. I always figure it out. I am building financial confidence one moment at a time. If you can identify a clear vision of who you want to be, then you can create that. That's literally how being an architect of your own life happens. How does a house get built? We have to have plans first. We have to have a mock-up of it. We have to have a drawing of it. Plans drawn up on paper. The architect imagines the structure of the house and then draws it on paper and then hires people to put it all together. And finally, this beautiful building is up and going. That's literally how you create your future, by having a vision, writing about it. I would highly recommend to always write about your vision. Don't just think about it in your brain. Give it life. When you're writing about your vision, you're giving it life. You do that, you consult it often, and before you know it, you are putting all the pieces together. And next thing you know, you have a life that you dreamt about. Because this is such an underrated gift that most people just kind of like repeat the same thing. And here's how they do that. They wake up in the morning. Our brain, okay, so the thoughts we have on a regular basis, we have about 60,000 thoughts every day. 90% of those thoughts, 95% are thoughts from our past, from our childhood that we just took with us into adulthood. And so when we wake up in the morning, our brain just brings all those thoughts back, and then we just recycle them and keep thinking them. And if you don't have a morning routine that allows you to see those thoughts and recognize, okay, these are just old recycled thoughts, I don't need to use them, I can think on purpose and choose these thoughts, then you're just recycling these thoughts and just living the same life over and over and over, because your thoughts are what guides your actions. And then your actions really just create your results. So throughout your day, you're just going through the same motions. Again, our brain will fool us into thinking we're doing something different because we will have different variation of the same thought. But I want you to pay attention. And this is why slowing down is so powerful, because you can notice, what results am I creating? What does the end of the day look like for me? If you did this tracking for 7 days, you would notice there are so many similarities of how I end my day. I end my day tired, and I sit in front of the TV and I watch some TV, I eat dinner, and then I go to bed. That's because you're having the same thoughts over and over and over. But if your days are different, then pay attention. Maybe you are thinking differently. But most people are repeating the same things over because we're not tapping into our imagination. Every morning that you wake up, you could decide, today I'm going to show up differently. What am I going to think about that's going to allow me to show up differently? And here's what's so amazing about tapping into your imagination to determine what your future looks like. You start interacting with possibility. And when you do that, you stop asking permission from your past to move into the future you want to dream about. That's another hold that the past has over us. We constantly use it, right? Because when we say to ourselves, I've never done that before, we're basically saying, because of my past history, and I don't have permission because of a lack of evidence of me having done this thing, then I can't do this thing in the future because I don't have permission. But if you recognize, no, my future is in my imagination, then if I'm faced with something that I've never done before, that doesn't even occur to me that it influences or interferes with me doing something different. If I'm faced with something I've never done before, I'm like, oh, let's get into it. Like, I just know that from my brain, I'll figure it out. I remember when we first moved to Indiana, my sister, it was so interesting. I don't think she saw this coming. She called the car dealership to book an oil change. And I don't know, they gave her some ridiculous amount. And she was like, that's crazy. And then she decided, you know what? I'm going to change my oil on my own. Just like that, right? And she did. She YouTubed it and she changed her oil. There was never a conversation of like, oh, well, I've never changed my oil change before. I've never done my own oil change before. So I have to go spend the money, which eventually, she spent the money. But just to understand that, not using her past history as evidence of what she's capable of in the future. In her brain, she just knew, like, if I've never done it before, I'll just give it a try. I could just try it. I was talking to a woman one time, and she told me that she was trying to invest into herself and join Money Academy. And she told her husband what it was going to do for her, how it was going to help her with her relationship with money, which was going to therefore help her with her business that she was building. And her husband told her, I don't have the exact words at this moment now, but he said something in the vein of, based on your track record, you don't have the reputation of getting an ROI on your investments. That sentence shut her down, and she never joined Money Academy because she was like, he's right. I've invested in the past before and I've never really made anything of the investment. And you see how damaging that is? What if not using her past investment as evidence of her being incapable of creating an ROI was not on the table? What if just from zero, starting from zero, I'm doing this and here's what I'm going to get from this? What if that's the conversation she had with herself? She would have a completely different future. This is an invitation for you to pay attention to the sentences you tell yourself about who you are, which is why I always like to tell you, determine what your desire is first, what you truly desire, before you ask yourself who you are. Because most people, when you ask them who they are, they tell you about their past. But if you know what you truly desire, which you haven't gotten yet, and then the next question is, who are you? Then you can define yourself by your desire. And that is in the future. You get to define yourself by your future. That is really powerful because then that pulls you towards a version of yourself that has not emerged yet. And that is compelling. Now, if you're going to use your past at all, in my opinion, use it for you. So say this woman who never invested in Money Academy, if she looks at her past and realizes, I have never invested money and made a tangible ROI from that investment, I learned what not to do, how not to interact with money that I have invested. I learned from those moments how investing in myself matters. And so I'm going to use all that information to determine how I move forward. I have a client in Money Academy who went through a divorce years ago and then was able to get herself out of debt because, divorce for most people creates lots of debt. Got herself out of debt. And now we're using that for her because even if she got herself out of debt, she got right back into debt. But now she's getting out of debt using that past information as evidence that she's capable of getting out of debt. She knows how to do it. Now we're going to make it sustainable so that if she decides she wants to be a debt-free person for the remainder of her life, she can be. If she decides, I want to be a debt-free person, but also I want to leave opportunities if I need debt for anything at all in the future, because that is a financial tool, she can be. And that's how you stop using your past against you. Your past is not your identity. Your identity is who you determine yourself to be. Yes, there are behaviors that you have displayed up until now that have created your results. And those behaviors are directly linked to the way you think. But just because you have certain behaviors that you're displaying today does not mean that's who you are. And financial confidence requires that you learn to separate yourself from the way your brain is thinking versus who you want to be, who you are. Because if you look deeply at your world today, your life today, you can truly see where your brain is just offering you thoughts and you just take them and believe them and you're acting on them. But deep down, you don't believe none of them. And if that's the case, then who you are isn't who you've been. And we can split that and work with the future version of yourself you want to be. So if you are determined to build a better relationship with money, you start first at cutting all ties with your past from a negative standpoint, because that will influence everything that you do. If you're one of those people that has been in debt before, maybe you filed for bankruptcy. Maybe you've had this incredible job that you've had good money. You just don't see where the money is going. If it feels like money is just bleeding, even though you're making a decent income, then we need to be able to separate you from that version of yourself and determine who you're becoming. And from there is how you create your future. But it starts first at how you're seeing yourself when it comes to money. What is the story you're telling yourself about yourself? And that is not necessarily your identity. And your identity is not etched in stone. So say you're like, this is just who I am. This is who I've always been. Okay, I agree. Fine. No problem. Let's not argue there. But that does not mean you're stuck there, because your identity is just a belief system you've operated on for so long, and now you can change it. Remember, we change our minds? Like, you can change your mind. Our brain is plastic and it can change completely. The more we practice new beliefs, the more our actual brain changes. And so we can always change. We can always redefine a new future based on our imagination. We can start creating evidence for who we are becoming so that then we're creating those results on purpose. I want to leave you with this question. If you've ever asked yourself, how do I create a future that is different from my history? Especially if you hold onto your history a lot. Like your story is really has a powerful influence in your life. Start by seeing what that story is first. Start by seeing how that story shows up in your life. And from there, determine the story you want to tell. You have to be able to determine what is the story that I want to tell about my future. And then practice that story. Because all these years you've been practicing the story of your past. And your past is a different book. Completely different book. Let's start a new book with a new title. And you get to decide what that title is, which is so fun, right? So think about that. What is the title of the new book you're starting after this episode? All right, my friend, I'll leave you there. I hope this was very helpful. This is actually a continuation on the conversation of possibility. Because once you interact with possibility, it changes who you are. And from today's episode, you understand that in order for you to continue to change and embrace possibility, what's available for you in the future, you have to stop treating your past as a prediction of your future. And just know, as a human being, you have the gift of imagination to visualize a new future and to act towards that future. Until the next episode. But before then, go out there and live your life on purpose.